Welcome to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we hope to give you some insight on how colleges recruit for major basketball. And our guest today is Wendell Alexis. He's a former European professional basketball player, and welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So tell me, where did, usually I start out with, where did you go to college?
I went to college, Syracuse University, from '82 to '86. During the times of, for those of us over 40, the Big East, as we remember it, and it was a great time. The Big East, I think, was the best conference back then.
Sure.
You know, with Georgetown and St. John's, and I'm sure everyone has seen the recent ESPN 30 for 30 that came on.
Yeah, yeah.
So that kind of gave you a history of the league, and it was a great show to watch.
Great. Well, so I'm going to go backwards though. So when did you get started in basketball? Because of course our viewers might not be able to tell, but how tall are you?
I'm 6'9".
6'9". So
yeah.
You weren't 6'9" way back when you were probably.
No.
How old did you get started at basketball?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and my parents came from the Caribbean. They came to the States. They met here in the States, and of course, you know, like most parents seeking a better life for themselves and for their children. I was born here, as I mentioned, in Brooklyn, and my parents knew nothing about basketball. My father, being from Trinidad, his favorite sports was soccer and cricket. My mother didn't play any sports, and grew up like any other kid, playing everything around from, you know, seasonal weather, from baseball, basketball, football. No Pee-wee teams, no Pop Warner. It was strictly, you know, out in the street. And around 14 years old, well, I say 13 years old, I had a growth spurt. I went away for the summer, stayed with my grandparents, came back. All of a sudden, I'm looking down at my father. And from there, you know, got into CYO ball. In my neighborhood, we didn't have a CYO team. So I had to actually travel to East New York and basically play in that parish. First year I didn't make the team. I couldn't play because I was a waiver.
Oh, wow.
So the following year I came back at 14 and actually started playing at St. Rita's in East New York. From there, caught the eye of a local referee. He told the athletic director at Christ the King about me, Father John Savage, great man. And from there, naturally, I went to Christ the King, saw the school. Now, this was back when Christ the King was, to put it lightly, a doormat.
Yeah,
They didn't have much of a program back then, but it was something that was building. And as it turned out, the referee that saw me was my freshman coach. You know, he coached in CYO and referee in CYO. So as it turns out, I went to that school, and actually I started playing organized basketball at 14 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now you're in high school, you're playing freshman year.
Right.
When did things start happening where you start to get recruited for basketball?
I would say the actual moment that I started getting noticed, I didn't know. At the end of my sophomore year, I believe, my high school coach gave me, varsity coach, he gave me 2 shopping bags full of letters. He said, "Oh, these are for you." So I'm looking at it and said, "What are these?" So I'm riding the train home, my teammates and I, and we're going through the bag. He said, "Oh, you got one from Maryland, and you got one from, you know, San Diego State." And you got what? Where? You know, and back then, of course, with no internet, I didn't know anything about these schools, you know. So I started reading the letter, and they basically all said the same thing. "Oh, we think you're a great player. We'd like you to consider our school for basketball." So now at this point was really the first time I started thinking, oh, playing college ball. And this is my.
And now, are you a good ball player, an average, an above average ball player in high school?
I would say at that point I was average. I mean, I was playing varsity as a sophomore. but I was coming off the bench because I had naturally upperclassmen in front of me. My junior year was really when I came into my own, when I started making, all conference and all city. But I would say my junior year was really when I started to get a lot more notoriety.
Right. So sophomore to junior year is really when things start happening.
Correct. You start to get a few more phone calls. You may get back then, of course, the colleges couldn't contact you, but they could send you information. Usually the first thing you get in the mail, of course, back then, we're talking about two different eras. Now you have more, from a younger age, you have these elite camps, you have these showcase camps. So you can get a lot more exposure at a younger age. Back then, you really had to be real good. There weren't AAU teams per se. There were only maybe 2 or 3.
Wow.
In New York, there was Riverside, there was the Gauchos, and maybe a third team. And if you weren't an all-city player, forget about playing. I think AAU really exploded on the scene in the 90s. But we're talking early 80s, mid 80s. There wasn't a lot in terms of to do. So what there was summer basketball in the park. You play with your teammates, your friends. Elm Corps Citywide was the big sort of hoop group back then. All the high school players, all the guys, and they had Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, Bronx, Staten Island. So you would get to see mostly a lot of the players all run across the same players you would play in high school. So during that time, I grew up during the era, Chris Mullin, Ed Pinckney. You would see those guys in Citywide and play against them.
Right.
So those were really, at that era, at that time, that was really what was available to you. One of my favorite basketball recruiters, Tom Konchowski, who writes a recruiting report. He was the guy back then, really. One of the few gentlemen that put out a recruiting report. And he would be at all the camps.
Wow.
The big camp back then was 5-star. If you got invited to 5-star, you were in. You were in. So I didn't go to 5-star until at the end of my junior year.
Wow.
And I remember Doc Rivers playing at Marquette was one of the counselors. And I was like looking at this guy. Back then he was built like a fullback. And prior to that, I knew anything about Marquette. Didn't know anything about the Midwest schools and things like that. But listening to him talk, and Hubie Brown was the speaker, you got a lot of information as a young kid, especially one that didn't grow as they do now. Being exposed to that kind of information, I was just like a sponge, just listening.
So tell me, when you're in high school, are the college coaches looking at your grades as well as your athletic ability? Are they looking at other things, or is it just about basketball, and that's it?
It's first the initial I guess pop factor would be how well you play basketball-wise. Do you have any talent, athleticism? IQ is a big word that they use. Do you know how to play? There's a lot of kids that think, oh, as long as I can shoot and score, I'm in. No, there's a lot more to go to that. On the next look, once a coach decides, okay, I like this kid, I like how he plays, I think he can help our program, the next question is, let me get his transcript. Let me get in touch with his high school coach. A lot of times, coaches, schools, that's sort of the first hurdle you have to cross as a high school athlete. One is the eye test, talent, skill, IQ. Second step, grades. Because if you don't have the grades, that's where it stops. That's where they eliminate you from the list. Because if you don't have the grades to get into a school and take your requisite your courses and the coursework that you need to actually be considered for a four-year institution, that's usually the cutoff point.
Okay, so now you're getting recruited by all these schools all over the place. What's the step that you take? How do you figure out Syracuse is the place for me? What is the thought process that you're going through?
Well, you first have to determine and do a lot of soul searching. You have to do a lot of self-evaluation. If you're getting letters from Kentucky, Syracuse, Michigan, and also you're getting letters from Siena, Marist, and Duquesne, where do I fit in? You have to be honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a high
Now, how are you
prospect,
doing this at 17 years old, though?
at 17 years old, you have to be very receptive in terms of, and be very honest. Because naturally, if you're a high talent athlete, you're going to have people telling, oh, you can play here and you can play there. And
Is
as
your mother and father getting involved in all this?
they should be, and I recommend that they are, to the point where naturally they're looking out for your interests, but they have to be your eyes and ears. But more so, and especially looking forward, you have to be your own harshest critic. Just because you're getting recruited by a big time school doesn't necessarily mean you have to play at a big time school. A lot of kids make a mistake. I'm a let's say top 100, top 50 player, based on what the recruiting and scouting reports are done. So now you're getting letters from all over the country. You have to determine: do I want to go to school for the name and the program? Yes, it's a great program. Or do I want to go to a school where I'm going to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond, and I'm going to have a better experience?
So your choices are wide now. You have
Correct.
Division I, Division II, Division III schools all recruiting you. There's
Right.
hundreds of schools.
Right.
How are you picking the schools? Is there a process? Is there a way? I know there's 5 legal visits that you get
Correct.
under the NCAA rules.
Right.
So is there a process that you take?
Well, first of all, you're gonna know firsthand where you fall, Division I, Division II, because each if you're high Division I and you're getting letters from Division II, you're not going to consider them. You're going to let the coaches know, and the coaches themselves know, oh, he's too high for us to recruit. He's out of our league.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, if you're getting letters from just, let's say, a lower Division I, Division II, they've kind of already, your fate is kind of already decided.
Okay.
You're not going to be recruited by Swarthmore or Stonehill and go to Syracuse.
Yeah.
The coaches are not going to be that far off.
Yeah.
A lot of times, judging by the letters you get, you know about where I'm going to play. You're also going to, in the scouting reports, they're going to say, oh, he's a high major, or he's a low Division I, or he's a mid major. So they kind of put you in a box, or put you in a category where they think you're going to play. Once in a while, there's an outlier that is here and he ends up someplace else, and that can be based upon how he does at a summer league, how he does at a showcase, how he does at an exposure camp.
Gotcha.
Sometimes kids come out of nowhere. They go to a hoop group camp. They go to a college camp. All of a sudden, boom, they're being highly recruited. But most of the time, by your end of your junior year, you have an idea who's recruiting you and who likes you. Like anything else, you always base your decision on, as a student athlete, what do I want to study? Where do I want to go to school?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's big school, 25,000 students, huge classrooms, 30-to-1 student to teacher ratio. Some kids thrive better in a small environment. That's why I say you have to decide and say, what it is do I want? Which situation, which environment is best for me to be successful? Basketball and academics.
So now, do you have, what are your 5 schools that you were picking from out of the hundreds that were sending you stuff?
I got my 5 choices, if I can remember correctly: Syracuse, University of Virginia, San Diego State, the Naval Academy, Marshall University.
Oh, wow.
So there was a sort of a wide.
Yeah.
And
that's
this was
a big wide difference.
Yeah, and again.
What enticed you to go to Syracuse then?
First it was the uniforms, the color. I know I wanted to stay within, let's say, a 5-hour radius of home, in case I had to get back home. I wasn't out on the West Coast, or I wasn't in the South. To be honest, I didn't know much about schools in the West Coast, schools in the South, other than if I went to a library and actually looked up one.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to stay in the East, in the Northeast. And, at that time, a lot of the exposure that I was seeing was, the Big East. They were just starting to get a little bit more traction, exposure-wise, TV-wise. besides the local St. John's,
Yeah.
Siena schools, again, within our metropolitan area, Fordham, Manhattan College,
Right.
Syracuse, their style of play. I know I like to play in up and down. I was, to find out later, the type of athlete that they were looking for. Long, lean, run, jump, you know, again, with the skill set that fit their school. So
Right.
it was a fit style of play and also my skill set.
So it's a young Jim Boeheim at that time.
Right, right.
And so now you're in college,
Mm-hmm.
going through. And what's the turning point at college where you realize maybe I can do this professionally?
Well, first you have the freshman year, which is everything is a shock. You go into it's shock treatment. You know, you're on your own. You don't have your mom and dad there telling you what to do. You're told where to go. You're told what to do, and you're expected to be there. There's no, oh, my mom's car broke down or my dad got home late. It's your 2 feet. You're on your own 2 feet now,
Yeah.
and you are encouraged to grow up very quickly. You start making decisions on your own. So sometimes some young men and young women, it's an adjustment that if they're not doing it before on their own, now they're forced to do it on their own.
Yeah.
The parents cringe and worry, and you know, as a parent would. But I think in the end, usually, if you're a parent and you know you see your kid by Christmas time, you notice a change. Definitely by the end of the freshman year, they're a whole different person. Athletically, the speed, the athleticism. You're not playing with your buddies in high school no more.
Yeah.
Everybody is a top 100 player. Everybody can run and jump. Everybody has skills. So now you realize I was maybe the best guy in my school, maybe in my town, maybe in my state. Now I'm dealing with a whole different animal. Everybody's
equal.
good.
Yeah.
And this is now where you realize if you're an athlete and you're competitive, you have to take your game to another level. So naturally now your old habits die and you have to develop new habits. I think for me, in my case, the biggest challenge I had was physically. I was a late bloomer. You know, I grew another 3 inches and 3 inches in college.
Wow.
So I came in like, you know, 6'7", about almost 6'7". By my junior year, I was 6'9".
Wow.
So my body was still growing, filling out. Strength was an issue, especially in the Big East back then.
Sure.
Took my bumps and bruises. But I think I realized that I can play at the next level, at least have a shot, again, by my junior year.
Great. So there's one thing that parents always talk about with basketball,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it's all about basketball and nothing about academics. Now, can you give a sense, at least through your time, what did Syracuse do for academics and basketball?
Mm.
Was there equal way, or was it all about just basketball and you're going to school for just basketball?
When you're playing at a and I'm talking about now a top program in the country, they have, and even the smaller ones. It all depends on the school and their resources. But most schools that have legitimate basketball programs and even athletic programs, they have programs in place, catch nets in place to help the student athletes succeed. I always tell, and I have 3 sons that play college sports. I always put the onus on the student athlete. There are things that help you. If you need help, there are tutors, there's student academic services. There's always something in place where you can go to seek help. When you're playing basketball as a student, it's a full-time job. You're practicing, you're traveling, you're missing class, your hours are extended, you get up early, you go to bed late. So there's a lot of learning and growing up that has to be done by the student athlete. And a lot of times on their own. You can't put the onus on the coach. Mm-hmm. They can do things to help you if you have a problem, but as a student athlete, maturity is your biggest friend. You have to learn to communicate and say, especially depending on the type of student you are. Yeah. If you already have good student studying habits developed in high school, then that's going to help you tremendously when you go to college, because now you don't have those safety nets, your parents' home, those things around you. You have to go to the library. You have to find an extra time. Hey, coach, I need a tutor.
Gotcha. Student
services. Hey, your academic advisor is going to be your best friend. So you really need to, again, be proactive and really be your champion of your future. One of the things my kids did, and I suggested that they did, was go to summer school, even if you don't have to. Take a course, 1 or 2 courses in the summer, because now that gives you a cushion during the season when you start to play. And a lot of times the watermark for athletes, especially those who play fall sports, is the first semester. I've seen a lot of kids come in, they're excited about the school year and don't pay attention to the academics, and then the first semester ends and they're not eligible, they can't play because they didn't take care of the classroom.
Yeah. So now you're in your last year at Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to graduate now. Are you getting drafted by the NBA? Are you looking at other avenues? What's happening in this thought process at this point?
At this point now, my junior year, I get invited to play with a Big East All-Star team. They're traveling foreign country. We're going to play basketball abroad. You hear a few whispers here and there about my chances of playing. There's no indication. I'm not a first-round player now. I'm basically a good college player. I'm coming off the bench. I'm playing 27 minutes a game, sort of like a sixth man.
Mm-hmm.
Going into my senior year now, when I fully start, you see articles here and there. No contact from any agents. No indication of I'm going first round or anything like that. Once in a while, you get an article. You might get, at that time it was Blake is his last name. He was an NBA scout, and he would once in a while say, "Oh yeah, this guy, he has a good shot. He has a good shot." Or he's a second round. And of course, remember the NBA was different back then. We had, I think, 5, 6 rounds as opposed to just 2 now. So I was, possible first rounder, possible second rounder. Where I end up, nobody knows. So we had a good I had a good senior year. We get knocked out in the NCAA second round by Navy, David Robinson. So now my career is over. So I get invited to postseason All-Star games. These are, at the time you had a big one in Orlando. You had one in Hawaii.
Wow.
This is where, the real top, let's say 24 players got invited. At that time, it was Len Bias, it was Chris Washburn, Pearl Washington, my teammate. Those players got invited to those camps. I went to Portsmouth, which is sort of the unknown players, the ones that are right there on the cusp that can, perhaps get drafted higher. Dennis Rodman was in that camp with me. A few other players that eventually might have gotten drafted in the upper rounds.
Wow.
So you never really get a clear, again, it's a situation. If you're an all-star, if you're a top college player, you know. Your coaches.
So did you ever try out for the NBA teams?
I got drafted in the 3rd round by Golden State Warriors. I ended up going out to the free agent rookie camp, playing with the summer league team, played well enough that I got invited back to the veterans camp. At that time, Chris Mullin was on the team, Sleepy Floyd from Georgetown, Joe Barry Carroll for those aficionados. So it was a veteran team, and they had, a few spots open. George Karl was the coach and the GM as well.
Wow.
So
now, how did you end up in Europe?
Well, I got cut last day. I actually had my uniform, my travel bag, and everything. We were going to play in Houston. And that red light, man, those of you remember, back then the telephones had a little red light. When you get a message, it would flash. So my roommate and I, we went to the barbershop because we were leaving that evening. We get back to the room, and the light's flashing. So it was a decision. You're going to answer, and I'm going to answer. So I grabbed the phone, and unfortunately it was for me. Got cut. That was October. At that time now, I'm back in touch with my agent, because by then I had an agent. And I had a choice. I could have gone to the CBA, which is sort of like the D League now,
Yeah.
play there, hopefully get called up, or I could go to Europe. And I had an offer to go to Spain. And for me, the most important thing is to play. I didn't know too much about the CBA. I knew about the Albany Patroons and a few other teams, and I know some guys got called up. But for me, I wanted to work on my game and get better. And I thought Europe gave me the best chance because it's sort of from my experience that I had from college when I traveled over to Europe. I liked the style of play, and I thought it was the best incubator for me to go over and work on my game.
And how many years did you end up playing there?
I went over there with the idea I'm going to do this for a year, and then I'm going to go back the next summer, and I'm going to make the team. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be better. And then about next time I blink, it was 10 years.
Oh my God! Wow.
So I played at that point, I played in Europe about 10 years before I realized, oh, what happened to the NBA?
Wow. Well, time is running out for our show. So my last question to my guests is, what do you want to leave the parents out there? What advice could you give them about basketball and going to college?
Be honest. I think the biggest thing, your student athlete, male or female, be honest. There's a lot of opportunities out there. Don't look at all options. Don't turn your nose down to Division II, Division III. There are a lot of options out there, especially if your son or daughter is a good athlete and has the ability to play at the next level. I think by the time they're a junior, going into the senior year, you know whether or not they have the ability to play at a college, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. And always look at location, look at resources of the school. A lot of times schools have programs, but their pockets are not that deep. That tends to have a direct effect on the experience that your son or daughter may have. Look at the coach. What are his aspirations? Every coach, every assistant coach wants to move on, naturally to bigger, better things. Those are all, I think, things you always have to take into consideration of when you're choosing where your son or daughter is looking to play college sports.
Great. Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.